King William III had long endured the manipulative behavior of Queen Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent, but just before his death, he managed to turn the tables and get his revenge. When William ascended to the throne in 1830, the United Kingdom wasn't prepared for his larger-than-life personality. Known for being bold, brash, and unfiltered, William earned the nickname the Sailor King due to his naval background and unrefined manner. His reign may have been short, but it was anything but uneventful. His unapologetically vulgar nature and unconventional approach to ruling explain why history often glosses over his time on the throne, preferring to focus on more polished monarchs. William's ascent to the English throne was never part of the plan. Born on August 21, 1765, as the third son of King George III, known as the Mad King, and Queen Charlotte, it was assumed that William would never rule. His parents likely never envisioned their younger son sitting on the throne. However, William's path to the crown was anything but straightforward. From a young age, he developed an intense passion for all things naval. At just 13 years old, William pursued this fascination further by joining the Royal Navy, starting his career as a humble midshipman. This decision set him on a unique and unexpected journey that would one day lead him to the throne. While serving on his assigned ship, William fully embraced the life of a common sailor, reportedly even going so far as to cook for himself. The rough-and-tumble world of 19th-century sailors, known for their lack of decorum and civility, seemed to suit him just fine. As soon as the ship hit the open seas, William cast aside his noble upbringing and acted like one of the crew. However, this free-spirited behavior led to a scandalous incident. While at a bar in Gibraltar, he found himself in the middle of a heated brawl, and the consequences were severe. William was arrested and thrown in jail, an embarrassing situation for any royal, let alone a future king. But the drama didn't stop there. It was about to escalate further, tarnishing his reputation even more. The moment England's prodigal son, William, heard the cell door close behind him, his desire to blend in as just another sailor vanished. He quickly switched to, "Do you know who I am?" approach, making sure his true identity as royalty spread among the guards. Unsurprisingly, they released him without delay. It seemed William was content to play the role of a commoner only when it suited him, royal privilege at its finest. As a young man, William was eager for excitement, and the American Revolution provided just the opportunity. Driven by his adventurous spirit, he crossed the Atlantic to serve in New York, making him the only British royal to ever take part in the conflict. However, being a prince in a war zone meant he quickly became a prime target. In fact, his presence caught the attention of none other than General George Washington, who devised a daring plan to kidnap the royal upstart. William's reckless need for action put him in serious danger, but fortunately for him, the British caught wind of Washington's plot and increased his security detail, narrowly avoiding an international incident. Still, this wasn't the last time William's fate would intertwine with Washington's legacy. There were more connections to come. When the Napoleonic Wars began in the 1790s, William, no longer in the Navy, was still eager to get back into the action. However, he was deeply offended when England politely declined his offer with a resounding "Thanks, but no thanks, Your Highness." The reasons for this snub were frankly quite embarrassing. Historians point to two major factors that kept William from serving against Napoleon, and both are hard to ignore. First, he had broken his arm in a rather undignified manner after a tipsy tumble down a flight of stairs. Second, he had just publicly spoken out against the war. In the end, it seems the Navy might have had a good reason for sidelining him. Prince William's scandals weren't limited to the seas. His escapades in the bedroom were equally notorious. In 1790, he attended a performance at Drury Lane and became instantly infatuated with the stunning Irish actress, Dorothea Jordan. His attraction was immediate and intense, but his choice in a romantic partner sparked quite the scandal. At the time, acting was considered a disreputable and immoral profession, and for a royal prince to openly pursue an actress was seen as a blatant violation of social decorum. Dorothea herself was no stranger to controversy. Known for her sultry stage presence and famously long legs, she had already gained a reputation for her numerous affairs and had several illegitimate children before crossing paths with William. Despite her colorful past, or perhaps because of it, the prince was captivated by her, and their relationship quickly became the talk of society, adding yet another layer of scandal to William's already tumultuous life. William certainly wasn't a picture of innocence when he met Dorothea. By that time, his reputation in the Navy had taken a nosedive, largely due to his constant entanglements in love affairs. Yet, despite Dorothea's scandalous profession, William seemed to genuinely love her. In 1791, he took the bold step of moving in with her, defying societal expectations and living in sin, as their class differences made an official, state-recognized marriage impossible. The controversial pair went on to have a staggering 10 illegitimate children together, and for a while they managed to carve out a relatively happy domestic life amid the scandal. Then, in a sudden and heartless turn of events, William dealt Dorothea a devastating betrayal. In 1811, after more than a decade of romance, their relationship came to an abrupt and painful end. Without much warning, William kicked Dorothea out of the home they had shared and severed nearly all ties with her. According to Dorothea, the breakup wasn't out of love lost, but rather out of financial frustration. William had grown weary of the substantial yearly allowance he had been providing her and ended the relationship for money, plain and simple. But William's cruelty didn't stop there. Although he granted Dorothea custody of their children, he attached a harsh condition. She was forbidden from returning to the stage, the very career that had once sustained her. Desperate and deeply in debt, Dorothea eventually had no choice but to defy his demand and accept a role to make ends meet. In response, William escalated his cruelty. He took their children away from her and cut off the additional financial support he had been providing for their care. This heartless act left Dorothea devastated and in financial ruin, and the consequences of William's actions would haunt her in the years to come. William never offered Dorothea any assistance after their relationship ended, and her once thriving acting career crumbled completely. Burdened by debt, and with no support from William, she fled to France in a desperate attempt to escape her creditors. Alone and penniless, Dorothea's life came to a tragic end in Paris, just 5 years after their split. As Dorothea's fortunes declined, William's rose, marking a stark contrast in their fates. In 1828, while serving as Lord High Admiral of England, William's reckless misuse of power reached new heights. During one infamous episode, he became so frustrated with his counselors that he made an impulsive and irresponsible decision. He took command of a fleet of ships, set sail without informing anyone of his destination, and vanished for 10 days. This blatant disregard for protocol and authority caused widespread alarm and led to his immediate resignation. Essentially, he got super fired from his prestigious role. But William's troubles didn't end there. With his dismissal came increased scrutiny, and the pressure on him began to mount. His erratic behavior and poor judgment during this period left a stain on his reputation, turning up the heat as both his personal and professional life spiraled further into controversy. In 1817, the royal family found itself in full-blown crisis, and William was at the heart of it. The heir to the throne had died unexpectedly, and suddenly the pressure was on William and his brothers to secure a successor. The problem? None of them had any heirs. They were either stuck in loveless, childless marriages or, like William, still unmarried. This meant William had one urgent royal duty: find a wife. And quickly. However, things didn't go quite as smoothly as he might have hoped. William's numerous illegitimate children made it difficult for him to secure a respectable bride, and his attempts to find a suitable match resulted in a royal embarrassment. His first choice was the young and eligible Princess Augusta, and he sent his younger brother Adolphus to court her on his behalf, a decision that would prove to be a major misstep. The plan backfired spectacularly. Not only did Princess Augusta's father reject the proposal, but Adolphus soon betrayed William by marrying the princess himself. This stunning act of treachery left William humiliated and added yet another scandal to his increasingly tumultuous life. In 1818, William finally decided to marry Princess Adelaide, a devout and kind-hearted young woman who, remarkably, was willing to overlook his many illegitimate children. If that sounds less than romantic, it certainly was. Upon their engagement, William wrote to his eldest son with a rather blunt statement, "She is doomed, poor dear innocent young creature, to be my wife." The two wed after only a week of acquaintance, and there was a significant age gap. William was nearly 3 decades older than the 25-year-old Adelaide. Despite the circumstances, both William and Adelaide made genuine efforts to be kind and supportive of one another in their unlikely union. The pressure on William to produce an heir was immense, especially since he was the healthiest of his surviving brothers. The royal family and the entire kingdom had their eyes on him, eagerly awaiting the continuation of the bloodline. William had recently married Princess Adelaide, and his previous brood of illegitimate children only served as further proof of his virility. So when Adelaide became pregnant almost immediately after their royal wedding, it seemed like everything was falling into place. All of Europe held its breath, anticipating the birth of a much-needed heir to secure the future of the British monarchy. In March 1819, Adelaide was 7 months pregnant, and she and William were filled with hope as they eagerly awaited the birth of their child. Tragically, disaster struck when Adelaide went into premature labor. She gave birth to a baby girl, Charlotte, but their joy was fleeting. Charlotte lived for only a few agonizing hours. The loss devastated the royal couple, yet their heartache was far from over. Over the next 3 years, Adelaide endured one painful pregnancy after another, but none resulted in a healthy child. She suffered multiple miscarriages, and any babies born alive survived only a few months at most. In 1822, their final confirmed pregnancy ended in the stillbirth of twin boys, leaving them heartbroken and without an heir. Despite William and Adelaide's hopes, their efforts to produce an heir were in vain. By 1830, it was evident that William's brother, King George IV, was nearing the end of his life, and William was poised to ascend the throne. As the inevitable approached, William's final words to his dying brother revealed a mix of sorrow and anticipation. He said, "God's will be done. I have injured no man," signaling both his acceptance of fate and his readiness for the responsibility that lay ahead. Then, on June 26, 1830, the previously unthinkable became reality. William IV was crowned King of England, marking the beginning of his dramatic reign. As you might expect, William's reign was far from smooth sailing. From the very beginning, it was clear he wasn't your typical king. For starters, he was staunchly against having an official coronation and only relented after relentless pressure from his advisors. Even then, he insisted on a sparse, no-frills ceremony. When traditionalists threatened to boycott what they saw as a half-crowning due to its lack of grandeur, King William sharply retorted that he'd be more than happy if they skipped the event entirely. His unconventional approach set the tone for a reign unlike any other. King William's coronation was anything but the dignified affair one might expect from such an important event. While Queen Adelaide approached the occasion with the utmost seriousness, William's behavior caused an outright scandal. He made no effort to hide his disdain for the pomp and ceremony, treating the event more like a farce than the solemn crowning of a monarch. His antics were so outrageous that it seemed as though he was performing in a comic opera rather than attending his own coronation. But this public display of irreverence was only the beginning. William had much more in store as he continued his unconventional reign. According to legend, William's reaction upon learning he was now king was one for the ages. When his attendants woke him to deliver the monumental news, William took it in stride and then promptly returned to his chambers. As his attendants protested, urging him to acknowledge the gravity of the moment, William delivered a now famous line. He cheekily declared that he had never yet slept with a queen. His irreverent humor, in the face of such news, instantly became a story for the history books, setting the tone for his unconventional reign. William IV's behavior as king was so eccentric that it would undoubtedly make Queen Elizabeth II recoil in shock. Known for his wildly unorthodox approach to royal life, William became infamous for his dinner parties, where he would spontaneously call up local hotels for their guest lists and invite a random assortment of people he knew, no regard for social standing or formality. To add to the chaos, he'd casually tell his guests not to worry about formal attire. His distaste for a quiet evening at home was evident, once complaining, "The Queen does nothing but embroider flowers after dinner." This carefree and scandalous lifestyle inevitably earned William his fair share of enemies. One adversary in particular would go on to cause him endless headaches and trouble during his reign. Since William and Adelaide had no children of their own, they poured their affection onto their young niece, Princess Victoria, whom they had chosen as their heir. Yes, this is the very same Princess Victoria who would later ascend the throne as Queen Victoria. However, there was a major obstacle standing in the way. William had an intense hatred for Victoria's mother, the Duchess of Kent. His feelings were so fiery that they could be likened to the heat of 1,000 burning suns. The root of this deep animosity wasn't without reason. The Duchess had indeed given William plenty of cause for such contempt. This feud created an ongoing tension that overshadowed the family's attempts to care for the future queen. William and Adelaide were already dealing with numerous personal issues, but the Duchess of Kent made their situation significantly worse. Fully aware that she was the mother of the future Queen of England, the Duchess seized every opportunity to assert her superiority over the childless couple. She constantly reminded them of her higher status, creating tension and friction in their household. Her demands were relentless, including a request for her own royal apartments and stables, justified solely by her position as the Queen's mother. These actions strained the relationship further, but unfortunately, this was only the beginning of the Duchess's troublesome influence on their lives. The Duchess of Kent was notoriously difficult, frequently displaying her rudeness directly to the royal couple. She blatantly disregarded Queen Adelaide's higher rank, often refusing to show the respect expected of her. Adding to the tension, she made a point of avoiding court, claiming she was offended by the presence of William's illegitimate children, which she believed clashed with her delicate sense of propriety. William's relationship with his illegitimate children was anything but simple. His daughters were often described as lively and pleasant company, bringing a sense of freshness and joy to his life. In stark contrast, his sons were notorious for their cruelty and greed, always scheming for more of William's wealth. His eldest son, George, was particularly relentless, constantly at his father's door with demands for money. The strain caused by these sons weighed heavily on William. In 1837, however, the family faced an even greater tragedy when his beloved daughter Sophia passed away during childbirth. This heartbreaking loss was a heavy blow, but little did William know, this was just the start of a series of misfortunes, as one cruelty would soon follow another. Upon hearing the news, William received a letter of condolence from his long-estranged son, George. Filled with hope, the aging William believed this might signal a reconciliation. Unfortunately, it didn't. George remained bitter and resentful, convinced his father had never provided him with enough financial support, and their strained relationship persisted until the very end. Meanwhile, William was haunted by the memory of his former lover, Dorothea. Even years after her tragic death in 1816, he couldn't seem to find peace. He commissioned a sculpture of her, and may have even tracked down a professional portrait that captured her in her prime as a celebrated figure on the stage. That wasn't the only thing William carried guilt over, as we'll soon discover. Recall how William had once narrowly escaped being kidnapped by none other than George Washington. Surprisingly, he seemed to harbor no hard feelings. In fact, later in life, during a dinner with an American ambassador, William openly expressed his regret at not becoming a free, independent American. He even went as far as to call the United States the land of George Washington, whom he described as the greatest man that ever lived. Whether this was genuine admiration or a bit of flattery over dinner, it had the desired effect. The American ambassador was thoroughly charmed. In 1831, William made his most startling move yet, all by the simple act of opening a door. At the height of the Reform crisis, with Parliament in turmoil, The king knew exactly what was needed. At the urgent request of the Prime Minister, William, strong and imposing, made an unannounced appearance at the House of Lords to dissolve the government, and chaos erupted. A royal visit to Parliament was a monumental event, and William's arrival sent shockwaves through the room. One man, overcome with excitement, even started brandishing a whip. The rest of the lords fared only marginally better in their behavior. Unfazed, William calmly donned his crown, walked confidently past them, and dissolved Parliament with the authority of a true monarch. It's true that absolute power can corrupt, especially when you don't actually possess it. Another memorable William moment occurred during one of his Parliament entrances. As he prepared to head to the building, his attendants informed him that the horses couldn't be readied quickly enough. William's response was nothing short of classic. Known for his lack of patience and decorum, he shouted, "Then I will go in a hackney cab." Needless to say, this would have made for a far less impressive entrance. William had little patience for pomp and ceremony, and his casual attitude extended to his royal possessions. Most notably, he was notorious for his repeated attempts to sell Buckingham Palace, which he found cramped and unlivable. To the shock of nearly everyone, his first ill-conceived idea was to turn the palace into military barracks. When that failed, he floated the idea of converting it into a parliament building. Fortunately, neither scheme gained any traction, and Buckingham Palace remained unsold despite his persistent efforts. William may not have aspired to be a humble ruler, but he certainly knew when to assert his authority. When his close friend, the renowned Admiral Horatio Nelson, got married, William didn't bother with formalities. He simply declared that he would be the one to walk the bride down the aisle. Faced with the king's command, even the great Nelson had no choice but to respond with, "Yes, sir." Not long after, William began flexing his power in more troubling ways. At 64, he became the oldest person to ascend the throne at that time, yet he quickly proved that age doesn't always bring wisdom. Holding largely conservative views, William once stunned even his less progressive peers by publicly opposing abolitionists in the House of Lords. This move left many confused and frustrated, as they simply wished the out-of-touch king would stay quiet. However, William wasn't entirely rigid in his beliefs. When it suited his personal interests, he could be surprisingly liberal. A notorious philanderer, he supported more lenient adultery laws, clearly aligning his stance with his indulgent lifestyle. By the 1830s, William was advancing in age, and just before his death, he made a firm request to his aide to destroy all of his correspondences. However, despite his efforts, a small portion of his letters still remain. What could the king have been so desperate to hide? It turns out he carried immense guilt. Among the surviving letters is one particularly heartbreaking message from his ill-fated daughter, Sophia. After his split from her mother, Dorothea, Sophia begged to come live with him. In a cold and heartless response, William refused her plea outright. It's difficult not to feel sympathy for the poor girl. His refusal paints a stark picture of his lack of compassion as a parent. At his birthday banquet in 1837, the aging William seized the moment to unleash his long-held resentment toward his old foe, the Duchess of Kent. In front of the entire gathering, he stood up and declared that, because the Duchess was incompetent to act with propriety, he was determined to live long enough for his niece Victoria to reach the age of 18. His vow was a clear attempt to ensure that the Duchess would never gain real power as regent. The dramatic announcement left the women in attendance in tears, shocked by the king's bold and public confrontation. So, did William succeed in his final mission? Even as the mighty sailor King William IV, he couldn't escape the inevitable grasp of death. On June 20th, 1837, after a battle with heart failure, he passed away peacefully at Windsor Castle. Yet, in a remarkable twist, it seemed even in death, William found a way to get the last laugh. His timing was nothing short of poetic. He died just a few weeks after his niece Victoria had come of age at 18, perfectly fulfilling his promise to live long enough to thwart the Duchess of Kent's ambitions to become regent. By outlasting her grasp on power, William ensured that the Duchess would never rule, cementing his final act of defiance. It was a masterful parting shot from a king who had been underestimated in many ways. His determination, even in his final days, reflected a stubbornness that carried him through life and ultimately shaped the course of British history. How's that for a lasting legacy of vengeance? Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe.